Eu sou o Marcos Cagliari, o CEO da Ipsos aqui no Brasil, e como sempre, eu vou começar falando trazendo alguns dados do nosso tracking Covid, que a gente tem há muitas semanas, semanalmente, que a gente chama de Essentials. Pessoal, vocês continuam vendo a minha tela? Eu estou apresentando alguns problemas técnicos aqui.
Não.
Não? Então vamos lá de novo. Peraí. Pronto, me avisem se tudo estiver certo.
Certo.
Vamos lá. Então, contando um pouquinho agora sobre os dados do nosso tracking semanal, que a gente chama de Ipsos Essentials. Esse é um tracking feito em 16 países desde março. Portanto, a gente tem uma massa de dados e uma evolução desses dados já há muito tempo. E hoje, nessa semana, o que a gente está identificando é que a gente, evidentemente, há uma expectativa muito grande sobre a vacina, né? Acho que talvez seja a principal conversa relacionada à Covid, seja as possibilidades de vacina que a gente tem, e a gente começa a ver que o tema coronavírus ele perde share of voice. Começa a aparecer outros temas já de muito mais, por exemplo, ligados à recuperação da vida mais pragmática, por exemplo, escolas e tudo mais. Entretanto, a gente ainda vê em alguns países retornos a fases iniciais daquele ciclo que a gente vivia falando, e a gente já apresentou aqui várias vezes, que são o novo isolamento, um novo confinamento e uma nova discussão de abertura. Isso está acontecendo em alguns países, principalmente da Europa Ocidental. Gente, eu tive de novo um problema aqui da tela. Vamos ver se a gente consegue. Bom, a primeira informação que eu queria trazer para vocês é o que a gente chama de Ipsos Disruption Barometer. Ele é um barômetro que mede semanalmente, e a gente depois consolida em trimestres, como está a estabilidade social e a confiança das pessoas. E o que a gente pode ver aqui, a gente separou todos os países da América Latina, é que houve uma queda brutal, não surpreendentemente, desde o início da pandemia, e uma leve recuperação no último quarto, né, no terceiro quarto, portanto, terceiro trimestre desse ano. Mas ainda assim, os números estão muito abaixo do que eles eram antes da pandemia, se vocês observarem bem, e num nível praticamente de zero, que é um nível de estabilidade, não é um nível que há confiança e um sentimento positivo. Surpreendentemente, o Brasil está num nível superior aos outros países da América Latina aqui, e a verdade é que esse nível, apesar de ser acima e apresentar um crescimento no último trimestre, ele ainda está muito abaixo dos índices, por exemplo, desde 2018, como a gente pode olhar nesse gráfico. Então, ainda é um momento de muita ansiedade, a gente tem sinalizado isso com frequência. Neste momento de instabilidade, de ansiedade das pessoas, as marcas estão ocupando um espaço muito forte. Aqui, por exemplo, a gente pergunta para as pessoas se elas acreditam que as marcas e empresas sejam uma fonte de informação mais precisa do que o governo. E a gente vê que mais da metade das pessoas concorda com essa frase. Interessantemente, é que há um percentual de pessoas que concordam com essa frase muito maior, 61%, entre as pessoas que têm a percepção que o país está fora de controle. Ou seja, as marcas estão ocupando um espaço para essas pessoas maior até do que o próprio governo. E a gente viu, e a gente tem repetido às vezes falando também aqui nesses webinars, o papel que as marcas têm a representar, do seu papel social, né, como agente social e para a melhoria comunitária, por exemplo. E se a gente analisa a mesma pergunta, né, o papel das marcas e empresas, inclusive mais forte que o governo, se a gente analisa isso aberto por gerações, e aqui a gente vê as gerações, nessas barras à esquerda, as gerações crescendo em idade, as mais jovens são muito mais próximas, confiam muito mais nas marcas do que as mais velhas, que é um sintoma interessantíssimo, né? As gerações mais jovens cresceram já com marcas muito atuantes, com marcas muito mais ativas. E outro dado muito interessante aqui do lado direito desse slide é que as pessoas com filhos também tendem a confiar muito mais nas marcas. A diferença é grande. 57% das pessoas com filhos confiam mais nas marcas, 44% das pessoas sem filhos. É interessante ver o papel nesse desafio que é, né, você ter filhos num momento como esse, o papel que as marcas podem obter. Elas adquirem uma relevância e uma confiança por parte das pessoas muito maior. Ainda um olhar geracional sobre as emoções das pessoas nesse momento que a gente está. Lembrando que essa pesquisa é muito recente, ela foi feita em setembro, essa onda. A gente vê aqui uma proporção direta entre algumas emoções e a evolução da idade. Por exemplo, tédio, né? Aqui as pessoas que se declaram entediadas são essas pessoas nas bolinhas laranja. Os jovens são muito mais entediados nesse momento do que os mais velhos, do que as gerações mais velhas. A mesma coisa acontece com solidão. Os jovens se sentem mais solitários, né? Aquela energia social que o jovem apresenta, hoje ela está extremamente reduzida. Então a gente acaba vendo que há uma percepção de solidão muito maior entre os jovens. Por outro lado, há mais ceticismo, há mais desconfiança de que as coisas vão melhorar por parte dos mais velhos. Então há uma correlação muito clara entre gerações, entre idade e sensações e emoções que a gente, como marcas, organizações, temos que entender para saber como melhor atacar esses needs de cada um. E um outro ponto também interessante é que se a gente analisa só as pessoas com filhos versus em oposição às pessoas sem filhos, a gente vê que as pessoas com filhos, até por serem um pouco mais velhas e serem mais céticas, como a gente viu, elas apresentam apoio muito mais forte a medidas mais restritivas, vacinações obrigatórias, fechamento de fronteira, restrições nos dias que as crianças vão para a escola. Quer dizer, essas pessoas com filhos se veem, elas acham que medidas mais sérias, mais fortes, vão ter mais efeito. Eu acho que com isso, o que a gente consegue ver é que há uma segmentação, né, um targeting, para começar a entrar no tema dessa conversa de hoje, um pouco diferente, que a gente tem que olhar a situação que as pessoas estão vivendo, a gente tem que perceber o isolamento que elas estão, se elas estão ou não trabalhando, se elas têm crianças, se elas apresentam grupos de risco dentro de casa. Começa a ter camadas mais profundas na análise dos targets que passam a ser muito importantes para a gente conseguir entender quais são as emoções que essas pessoas estão tendo. A gente cita aqui, retomando um dos slides que eu mostrei, que os jovens eles necessitam mais nesse momento de uma fuga, de um escapismo, de diversão, de entretenimento. Eles estão mais entediados, eles estão se sentindo mais solitários. Ao mesmo tempo, os adultos com filhos precisam mais de controle, né, nesse momento de tanta ansiedade e insegurança, principalmente com relação às crianças. Então a gente está vendo aqui que é importante analisar não mais com os clássicos segmentos, aqueles grupos homogêneos e grandes que a gente normalmente analisava, mas entender de fato o que as pessoas estão passando. E com isso eu acho que a gente já tem um bom pano de fundo aqui para entrar nos nossos palestrantes. With that, I would like to introduce you to Chris Murphy. Chris, who's going to bring his view on the new targeting. Chris, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Very good. Thank you, Marcus. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to move you here to the middle,
not on the
Marcus.
presentation mode, though.
There we go. All right. Very good. Well, first, thank you so much to all of you for joining us this afternoon. And one of the questions that we're getting quite a lot these days, is are we still targeting the right people, especially, as it pertains to the stability of some segmentation schemes that might have been built pre-COVID. So let's get right into answering that. I think as we set the context for this, and as my colleague Dawa, I think, shared with this group last month, we've gotten to a point where we've gotten beyond just a health or a medical crisis, and even beyond just the financial aftershocks of that. I think our crisis is much more multidimensional than that now. Social unrest, climate challenges, environmental challenges, political challenges. I think it is very fair to say that our crisis is truly multidimensional, and in a lot of ways, it ladders up to what we think of as a control crisis. So personally, I think we feel a lack of control in our day-to-day activities that maybe we felt back in January or before. But then when you couple that with surroundings that also seem out of control, unstable, it can lead to quite a lot of mental health and physical challenges, and a lot of adjustments that we're making in terms of our priorities and behaviors. In terms of some of the emotions that we are measuring, Marcus quoted the Essentials survey that we do every other week, and this is another kind of draw from that data set. But here I'm just showing internationally the emotions that folks are feeling. Oops, there we go. If you look at the left side of the ledger there, you see a lot of the negative emotions that are being registered, and on the right side you see the positives. And the one that I would point out to you, or the one dynamic I would point out to you, is if you look at frustration, internationally that's coming in at 32% compared to kind of empowerment and the feeling of defeat, which we're picking up there on that bottom row. So almost a 2-to-1 ratio between frustration and defeat, or excuse me, and empowerment. So 32% saying they're feeling frustrated, only 15% saying they're feeling empowered. And we see that in a lot of countries. We see it in Brazil, but again, just kind of amplifies this notion of a control crisis. We are also seeing very fundamental changes in category drivers, shifts that we would not have seen in normal years. So one of the things we have done is go into a number of our brand health trackers and look at the results of driver analytics and relative importances that were going to various attributes back in January, pre-COVID, and comparing those same relative importances to what we see today when we rerun those same driver models. And I'm just going to show you a few examples. We've got a lot of these now, but it's going to give you a sense for how things have changed in terms of what people prioritize in different product categories. And please pardon the kind of primitive graphics here. These analyses were done very recently. we haven't put together some really elegant slides on it yet, so bear with me on that. But what this is showing is that in the OTC category, if you look at kind of the drivers which are arrayed in order of relative importance back from early 2020, so you can see brand for me was at the top, variety was number 2, peace of mind was number 3, and et cetera. You can see when we rerun the driver analyses here 6-7 months later, a lot of movement. That's number 2 drive. What used to be the second most important driver has fallen all the way down to number 8. What used to be number 3 has vaulted all the way to the top, and you can see the other examples of movement as well. When we look at the food category, we see some stability at the very top of the house, but then dramatic changes there in items 3 through 10, where item 3 drops all the way from January to item number 9 when we rerun the driver analysis later in the year. You can see that attribute number 5 comes all the way down to number 10. You get the point. And then this is a particularly rambunctious category. So this is infant formula, and you can see the entire top 5 drivers were unstable, with the old number 1 and number 2 drivers falling to the 3rd and 4th positions, and the number 1 and 2 spots being overtaken by things like trust and understanding me. So again, just making the point that people's category priorities have changed quite a lot. Their surroundings have changed quite a lot. And I guess we shouldn't consider this to be too surprising, because as we've covered on a previous Recalculando, we are adaptive and contextual decision makers, right? So our brand selections, they're being driven by a combination of context, our own processing, our motivations. And right now, our context has been completely shaken by the multidimensional crisis that I talked about before, meaning that our decision making, our decision drivers are much more fluid and changing than they had been in more stable times. Another analysis that we've done with the essentials data is to actually execute a segmentation scheme using the data on what we know people are prioritizing these days. And don't worry, I'm not suggesting that all the clients on this call take this segmentation and start to use it. That's not the point at all. The point is just to say, when you use issue prioritization, as a basis for segmentation, you see quite a bit of differentiation from group to group, and things that would not have existed at all just 7 months ago. So you can, if you've already looked at those segment titles, you can see we have a bit of a sonic theme here, or a 60s and 70s rock and roll theme. But those first two segments are particularly interesting because the first one, which we've called "We Can Work It Out," this is a group that really wants to get back to an economic restart, an economic recovery, but they're really cautious about it. They're pragmatic about it. They don't want to put themselves or others at risk as the economy is restarted. The second group, on the other hand, they have the same desired outcome. They're looking for an economic restart, but this group has very little regard for safety measures. They are not particularly concerned about wearing masks, taking precautions, that type of thing. They're much more ready to just kind of jump right back into their everyday routines and habits. And even though they have that sort of shared goal, you can imagine the kind of conflict, and you probably see the conflict between these two segments playing out in day-to-day life. So there's that sort of fundamental tension between those who want to be pragmatic versus those who just want to get back to it. A few other segments that emerge, there are those who are particularly concerned with social justice and inequality. We call that the Get Up, Stand Up group. There are some out there that we're calling Gimme Shelter that are just still paralyzed by fear and really nervous about re-engaging in any way. And then lastly, there's a group that's prioritizing the environment, as their chief concern. But again, just to give you a flavor for how different segments can prioritize very different things. So hopefully, as we've shared some of these data, it's been clear that our priorities are shifting, our category drivers are even shifting, and that leads to this larger question of, okay, in this very lengthy period of unprecedented disruption, are we still really targeting consumers in the right way? So at Ipsos, and I think most of you would agree with me, that understanding consumers and their context is really fundamental to achieving any type of meaningful growth strategy. And when we think about segmentation here, we like to use this term connected segmentation, which I'll explain in just a moment. But we also realize that a revisitation of segmentation right now has to be sensitive to timing needs, and budget needs. Most companies these days do not have the insights and analytics budgets that they had a year ago. And so we're working on shorter budgets. We're also working on very short timelines as we try to adjust to the multidimensional crisis around us. So we want to make sure that our solutions, our segmentation solutions, truly fit the times and are not tone deaf to those very pragmatic realities. So when we talk about connected segmentation, it's kind of got a three-dimensional meaning for us. We want to make sure that when we address this topic, that we are connecting authentically and respectfully with consumers, that any exercises we ask them to go through with us are very respectful of their time. We try to make it as fun and engaging as possible for them, and to where we're getting the most high-quality data as a result. So we want to connect with consumers. We also want to connect via data science. We might be working more quickly. We might even be working with fewer dollars, but that does not mean we have to make sacrifices in terms of the analytic rigor or stringency that we apply to the craft of segmentation. And then lastly, again, just because we might be in a hurry, that is not an excuse to stop being connected organizationally. It will be just as important, if not more important than ever, that everybody with an interest in the subject of segmentation is aligned on the same page and activating a segmentation in lockstep with one another. So again, the headline here says, yes, we need to move fast, but more than ever, identifying, targeting folks is a team journey where we want to embrace that human factor and not abandon data science. So we want to get at these kind of questions of targeting quickly, easily, respectfully, and in a budget-sensitive manner, right? But the questions are still the same, right? What are the emotional, functional needs in the category? How do people partition on those elements? How important are the segments? How big are they? Where's the money? And don't worry, I'm not going to give you a big sales pitch here, but we have developed a technique called Slice that allows us to get at this in a modular way, a very quick way, that is respectful of the respondent, that still honors data science and coming to a very scientifically driven solution that can be embraced across an organization. And I'll end with that, which is to say, let's make sure, again, that when we do revisit segmentation, that we're not getting lax in terms of recognizing all the other parts of the business that segmentation needs to feed. And those are being articulated here. And I think Miriam's going to come on to this a bit later in some more detail. So if I wrap up some of the key themes that I've covered here, as we think about targeting consumers in this era or reassessing our segmentation schemes in this era, we want to make sure that the segmentation fits the times. We want to make sure that it's agile, sensitive to budget, sensitive to timing needs, but that it's still accurate, data-driven, and we need to get to solutions quickly, but that does not mean we abandon our teammates along the way. We still need to be organizationally inclusive and make sure that we're just as disciplined about embedding and activating segmentation schemes as we ever were. And then lastly, just a few notes, some implications for brand leaders here. I think, given all that conflict and crisis that we talked about earlier, it has never been more important to keep our finger on the consumer pulse, which is quite conflicted right now and going through a period of profound change. So again, never been more important to understand what people are doing differently, how they're feeling, how they're adjusting, and then offering really targeted, tone-appropriate messaging and solutions that help us cope when we're feeling kind of that lack of control, which is just further exacerbated or amplified by highly unstable surroundings right now. So with that, I will turn over to Miriam, but not before I ask one closing question. And that is, please ask yourselves, and I challenge clients with this question every day, is your segmentation still valid? Is something that was done in 2019 or before really valid in the times in which we're living? And if you say yes, it is, I would challenge you to think about that again. Seriously, I think we really want to be sure that we're targeting in a way that's in step with the times. So with that, over to you, Miriam.
Hello, everyone. Obrigada, Cris. Deixa eu então compartilhar a minha tela com vocês. Eu acho que tem... vocês estão todos vendo minha tela?
Ainda não.
Ainda não.
Ainda não. Não, mesmo.
Então, não deixa eu compartilhar de novo. Agora imagino que sim.
Sim.
Beleza. Bom, eu acho que uma das coisas que eu gostaria de agradecer o Cris, além da presença, eu acho que é lembrar a todos nós, né, tanto da Ipsos quanto vocês, clientes que vieram nos ouvir, ou pesquisadores, no meio dessa tarde tão calorenta, né, vocês se disporem a nos ouvir, obrigada. Eu acho que quando a gente segmenta os consumidores, para além de estar fazendo um exercício matemático, buscando uma solução matemática, teórica, bonita, né, o que a gente está querendo é, com vocês, construir prioridades, estratégias, formas de olhar o negócio. Nesse sentido, uma segmentação é sempre muito diferente da outra, porque ela é uma construção de um coletivo, e ela mira sempre para o negócio. Ela é muito mais plástica e móvel do que pode parecer numa primeira impressão. A gente está falando de dados que são muitas vezes duros, mas de uma análise que é muito móvel, né? E é assim que tem que ser. Num momento em que os consumidores estão vivendo uma situação tão disruptiva e passando por emoções tão distintas como as que o Cris mostrou, que vão do tédio ao sentimento de solidão, enfim, é muito importante a gente conseguir entender o que está acontecendo com os nossos consumidores e em que direção eles estão caminhando e como que os nossos segmentos permanecem ou não válidos. Tá? Então, eu queria mostrar um pouco para vocês os dados Brasil. A gente pode ver que os dois maiores segmentos do Brasil, We Can Work It Out e o Get Back, né, que somam 59% do universo, né, lembrando, We Can Work It Out um segmento que ainda tem uma preocupação com a Covid, mas também tem uma visão pragmática de retorno da economia. E o Get Back com uma visão muito mais focada na retomada da economia, ou seja, 59% do nosso universo tem entre os seus principais focos a questão da recuperação da atividade econômica ou do cenário econômico, né? Sendo que o primeiro deles aqui, que representa 28% no Brasil, ele tem um pouco mais de atenção ao mesmo tempo para a Covid do que o segundo, tá? Tendo essa maioria que a gente estava falando, de 59% preocupada com a retomada da atividade econômica, a gente ainda tem os segmentos que a gente um segmento importante que representa 18% do total da população, muito preocupada com o impacto social, 15% da população que se sente quase que ainda em pânico. Acho que todos nós conhecemos alguém que ainda não conseguiu pôr o nariz fora da porta, né? E um segmento um pouco menor, e que é menor do que o total global, e é menor do que em alguns outros países, como França ou Alemanha, bastante preocupado com as questões ambientais. Se vocês, na verdade, somarem esses outros segmentos, a gente vai ver que a participação de preocupações que vão além da questão econômica, representa 51% do universo. Então, nós estamos falando entre 59% versus 51%. Tá? Essa dicotomia é a dicotomia que a gente conhece, que a gente vive e sofre todos os dias, a questão da extrema polarização da realidade brasileira e que nos deixa tantas vezes meio agastados, né, ou tontos. É interessante a gente ver que quando a gente fala em preocupação com o cenário econômico, o brasileiro, fundamentalmente, ele não está falando numa preocupação muito com os macroindicadores econômicos. Ele está falando com uma preocupação muito mais doméstica. Ele está preocupado com que as pessoas com que ele conhece, ou que ele próprio, as pessoas da sua família, ou ele mesmo, percam o emprego, que eles não sejam capazes de pagar as suas próprias contas. Né? Então, quer dizer, não é ainda uma visão com o macro cenário, assim como quando a participação menor da preocupação com o meio ambiente, o segmento Green Day, também revela essa preocupação. Primeiro eu estou olhando para mim e para minha situação mais imediata, para depois eu poder olhar para o universo total. E acho que não é à toa que países que têm a questão social e a questão geral da proteção social mais resolvida, como a França e a Alemanha, consigam olhar com um pouco mais de cuidado para a questão do meio ambiente, né? O que não exime a gente da necessidade de olhar e olhar muito bem, né? é muito interessante a gente ver que este é um momento onde todos nós, de alguma maneira, estamos diante de uma grande motivação de controle, né? É muito mais do que só uma crise de saúde, é muito mais do que só uma crise econômica, é uma crise de controle, né? E que teve impactos sobre cada um de nós diferentes. Algumas pessoas saíram loucamente esterilizando tudo, outras um pouco menos, umas criaram estação de álcool gel na entrada da sua casa, mas existe sempre um sentimento de como que eu vou controlar e administrar tudo isso. E os dois principais segmentos, eles basicamente, em níveis um pouco distintos, apoiam ações de controle e de acompanhamento da situação de saúde geral, como o uso obrigatório de máscaras ou as vacinações obrigatórias, tá? A gente pode ver que a gente já está passando aí para uma segunda fase, alguns estados já entrando no verde, né, que eu espero que se mantenha. Nesse momento em que a gente começa a retomar algumas atividades, todo mundo já começou a voltar a fazer sua compra no supermercado, né? Os dois principais segmentos voltaram a fazer essas compras, ou alguma compra em outro tipo de loja, o Get Back indo um pouquinho mais ao shopping do que o We Can Work It Out, mas, enfim, alguma retomada, uma parcela maior no Get Back já usando o transporte público, enfim. Mas, de uma forma ou de outra, existe uma consciência, mesmo no segmento que é um pouco, vou usar aqui um termo meio pejorativo, mas que é só para simplificar, um pouquinho mais negacionista, né, que é o Get Back, um sentimento que, em maior ou menor grau, a minha vida foi impactada, mudou, e provavelmente não será mais a mesma, né? Ela mudou completamente, ou eu vou fazer algumas mudanças de alguma maneira, né? Ou seja, com maior ou menor grau de tenha o maior ou menor grau de aceitação dessas mudanças, do impacto que essa realidade da Covid trouxe para a minha vida, os nossos consumidores, os indivíduos com quem a gente lida, os cidadãos com quem a gente lida, eles não são mais os mesmos. Eu diria até que a gente está lidando com um tipo de transformação que talvez seja parecido com a que viveram os meus avós, que viveram a Segunda Guerra Mundial, né? E o exílio e tudo depois da guerra, enfim, ter que procurar vida em outro país. E em momentos de tanta ruptura, a sua marca vai precisar, e vai precisar mais do que nunca, entender as nuances, os detalhes, os interstícios de comportamento e as variações de comportamento que existem entre os indivíduos. Porque muitas vezes, quando a gente olha uma segmentação, a gente olha, parecem blocos muito monolíticos. Mas você só chegou a essa segmentação e a esses blocos que aparentemente são tão monolíticos, entendendo diferenças, conflitos, elementos de ruptura. E os elementos de ruptura claramente estão mudando, né? Então, revisar as suas segmentações, poder voltar a elas, refazer, rever e garantir que ela continue a te ajudar a fazer com que a sua marca seja relevante, é extremamente importante.
Muito bom, Miriam. Obrigado. Aí, muito bom. Você pode deixar a câmera ligada. Aí, I will invite Marcos and Chris also to turn on the cameras. Very good and interesting topic. as you know, we talk about segmentations as a research agency. Practically, every conversation that we have with our clients, it is very important to understand the segments for growth. Where do we face the most challenges? So very important to understand what are the trends that are impacting these segments and how we should be probably more alert than in any time to review the segments that we are dealing with in many senses. And probably it is worth spending a few minutes here until we get done with this recalculando about a couple of things. Pessoal, tenha o chat se vocês quiserem para colocar perguntas. Eu vou começar aqui com algumas que eu tenho também ao longo da apresentação que chamaram muito a minha atenção, mas fiquem à vontade de colocar, eu vou pegando e eu vou jogando aqui na conversa, tá bom? So one of the questions I have, and this might not be a very easy one, sorry for that. I will make it in English so Chris can also contribute. Is, in segmentation, we have been used to think about consumer attitudes, lifestyles, behavior, this kind of things, demographics regularly. Now, what you have shown today goes much more beyond the traditional aspects that we used to have to segment the consumers. We are talking about the way they see the measures that the government is taking, the way they imagine their kids going back to school, the way they shop, but not in the sense of the tactical shopping thing, but more in the attitudinal, the attitude that they put behind the segmentation. So if we have to think in future segmentations or segmentation from now on, how are we going to do to consider exactly the things that will break down this consumer for us to make sure that we target the right people?
Chris, do you want to start?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, interesting. The all those criterion variables that you laid out in the beginning there. Diego, you talked about attitudes and lifestyles and behaviors and demographics. The one thing you didn't mention, I guess you kind of captured it with behavior, was just occasions and need states, right? That's another kind of common basis upon which we'll segment a marketplace. And yeah, if you think about all of those in context of the next thing you said, which is think about just your day-to-day life patterns, right? How you get your kids to school, right? How you do your shopping, all that stuff's just fundamentally changed right now. We're adjusting. So I think I would argue that any occasion-based or need state-based segmentation scheme that might have been established before the spring of this year would definitely be subject to at least a revisitation, right? It's like, does that really hold up? Because just think about the way we spend our days, the way our occasions have been altered, the way we interact with one another, even on those rare occasions we are together. It's all changed, So I think those particular types of segmentations really call out for a reassessment kind of in the current reality. Now, the one that you mentioned that is probably going to be the most stable of all, I would have a hard time arguing with instability, would be a demographic or a priori type segmentation, right? Now, if your segmentation scheme is based solely on some combination of, age, income, education level, that type of thing, well, yeah, that is going to be stable. Now, some of the profiles amongst those segments are probably going to be different. But yeah, I would say especially occasions, need states, anything that's motivationally driven, we should at least go in, have a look at, have the drivers changed in the categories? If we're executing typing tools in trackers, can we go in and look to see if we're seeing changes in the results in those typing tools? Any of those things I think would be good quantitative evidence that a revisitation would be in order. I don't know, Miriam, what do you think?
Yes, I have the same impression. I think even if we are talking about need states or motivations, even if the basic motivation remains the same, let's say control or status, the manifestation of this motivation will be not the same. What means status today? When we see all the damage that COVID caused in our economic, do I want to show status in the same manner that I was able to, that I was wanting 2 months, 6 months ago in the past year? So even the traditional basic human motivations will have different manifestations. You will express that in a different way. We'll have different meanings. So in this sense, I think we will have to go back to our attributes, drivers, and really re-understand and reassess what consumers are saying to us.
And here, if I may add, I think there is an interesting issue as well, complementing what you two just said, is that we have new clusters of attributes that go together. We are used to see attributes that drives each other. So we normally see they cluster in a certain way. Right now we have new triggers of clusterization of the attributes, such as how do you deal with if you have someone vulnerable in your house or not, if you have kids and you think of school or not, and even if you are a supporter of the current government, whatever it is. And this is happening all over the world, but definitely in Brazil and the US, for instance, a high correlation between your political ideology and the way you behave, your attitude. So it's very interesting to see how fluid this combination of attributes are. And I guess, Diego, may I ask a question as well?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I guess that this triggers another question for me, which is if this is so fluid as it can get, and I understand that the relationship with the disease definitely can get very fluid, what would be our recommendation to clients in this sense regarding their own segmentation and strategies, You're mute, Chris.
Sorry about that. I think we're all going to have to be a little bit more tolerant of segment fluidity than we have in the past. I think normally when we do big segmentation studies, we do that with the expectation that that study is going to endure for 3, 4, 5 years, something like that, right? I think given the times, that type of longitudinal stability may not be achievable, which is yet another argument I would say for going with a more agile, less expensive, kind of solution, realizing you're going to have to kind of be constantly updating, making sure you're keeping the finger on the pulse. So yeah, I think thinking that a segmentation we go out and develop today is still going to be completely applicable 5 years from now, I kind of doubt it. Okay, y'all feel free to disagree with me, but I have a hard time seeing that type of stability over time as I used to.
Yeah, the big question that it remains is, do we will have 5 years stability as we used to have, and if we will, when we will have it? Because I think it will not be that close. Probably we will need 10 years to see, to have the sensation of stability, at least.
But on the other hand, if we want to stay in business for the next several years, we better understand what our consumers are doing, what they're feeling, how they're responding, how they're adjusting, how they're doing things differently. We better be adjusting our targeting, or we won't even be in these jobs anymore. If we don't figure this out.
Point. If we keep waiting for stability, probably we will lose much more.
That's right.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was wondering, Chris, if we have any advice on how to prioritize also what kind of segmentation should be updated right away. Because in many cases we are talking, some of our clients deal with different categories and subsegments. And, you know, we have seen like innovation, you know, revising all the pipeline innovation, but how do I prioritize the innovation that is going to be exactly relevant? And probably the same for segmentation. Is there any way? I know that we will have to deal with some uncertainty, as you are saying. This is uncertain times. But if you have any tips on that, and Marcos and Media would be, I think it would be very useful as well.
Yeah, and I think this is a little bit redundant with something I shared before, but I think you let the data drive the decision, right? So, you know, I wouldn't say, oh, just take my word for it that your segmentation scheme needs to be revisited. You know, let's go into the data. Let's look at our drivers that were done, you know, pre-COVID, and let's look at what we see as a result. Let's go into typing tools that were executed pre-COVID and that are executed now, and to see, okay, are there differences? So you look for evidence that would suggest that things have either changed or not in your category. And a lot of our clients do, you know, UNA trackers, and so they have a pretty good feel for whether occasions are shifting or not. So whether it's occasions, you know, usage occasions, motivations, drivers, you know, what have you, we have a means by which to quantify that without going to additional expense, right? And then assuming that you do find, oh yes, things have indeed changed materially, that's when I think you jump in and start the reassessment.
Awesome.
Yeah. If I may add, I think that it's a time in which it's absolutely essential to understand what is going on with each one of us. So the understanding bit of it became far more important than the KPIs progression. So if in a position of measurement, I would say that understanding is right now the main goal. And we see that it is appearing a lot of new needs for people. They're new. They're absolutely new. So this is unheard of as far as I can say, at least, that we have new needs coming up so fast and maybe changing as fast, equally as fast. So I would say that understanding right now what are the needs, and just then figuring out what's the role of your category, and in particular what's the role of your brand. This is absolutely key at this moment. It's an entirely new game on this sense.
Absolutely. Miriam, would like to add something?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay, guys, I think we had a very good time today. Awesome topic, very good time as we plan our next steps for our businesses to think about this segmentation. As we were saying right now, we have plenty, obviously, of information inside our companies to first understand where the impacts are, and then we know that we have more agile and affordable ways to run segmentations as an update. We know that we will have to deal with uncertainty as well, but here we are to support our clients. So I would like to agradecer a todo mundo que participou hoje, trocando agora um pouquinho para o português. Obrigado por vocês fazerem o tempo de participar conosco aqui hoje. E em breve vocês devem receber o nosso invite para o nosso próximo webinar Recalculando dessa série. Agradecemos demais a participação em toda a série e esperamos vocês no próximo, tá bom? Boa tarde para todos. Tchau, tchau. Bye bye. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Marcos.
Thanks, Diego.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Have a good afternoon, everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.